In this episode.
So today we are humouring me.
Excellent.
And we're going to talk about the Pilgrims. And we're going to talk about the Mayflower and Plymouth Rock and Thanksgiving and the whole founding myth of America. Once they got to America, once they had a blank slate and nobody was there to stop them, they built precisely the society that they'd always wanted. If you worshipped any other god than theirs, you were put to death. Who the English called King Philip, they put his head on a pike, and it stayed there for 20 years.
20
It stayed there. But there's one more thing I actually want to do as well, which is connect all of this to modern America, because this isn't history. This is still running.
I can see it. I can see it. Okay, what are we talking about today?
So today we are humouring me.
Excellent.
And we're going to talk about the Pilgrims. And we're going to talk about the Mayflower and Plymouth Rock and Thanksgiving and the whole founding myth of America. The United
God,
States.
you're already triggering everybody. I can hear it in the comments now.
And
Sorry, Karen.
I should warn you up front, almost everything you think you know about this is wrong. It's wrong.
Well, I mean, in my defence, I'll be honest, I actually know embarrassingly little beyond kind of the primary school version. I don't really know very much at all about it. Boats, rocks, a turkey, some grateful Indians, which doesn't track really, does it?
Well, that is actually the version that about 330 Americans still believe. So you're actually in excellent company.
Wait, only 330 or...
Well, there's only 330 of them there, isn't there?
Do we mean 330 million, maybe?
Yes, 330 million Americans.
Right,
You
okay.
know what I mean.
No, I know. Oh, well, I do, but people are going to take you literally. And then... Anyway, carry on.
Here's the thing. Even the name is made up. They didn't call themselves Pilgrims.
Well, what did they call themselves then?
Saints. Saints. They call themselves saints. And everyone else was a stranger, which I suppose rather tells you everything you need to know about these people right from the start, don't you? The word pilgrim
Massive ego.
Only appears once in a journal from 1651, and it's a biblical allusion, quoting Hebrews and comparing their departure from Holland, the Pilgrims or the Saints, their departure from Holland to the Old Testament wanderers. And then nobody used it again for 150 years.
So where did Pilgrims come from then? Where did that come from?
It was invented. It was invented around 1800, so a couple of hundred years ago. By a group in Plymouth in Massachusetts who wanted to organize an anniversary celebration. And they needed something that sounded better than what these people actually were. What these people were actually called was separatists. That was their official name. They were separatists.
Well, that's a terrible name for a founding myth, isn't it?
It's a catastrophic name for a founding myth because it describes exactly what they were. Religious nutters who couldn't get along with anyone. And obviously there's a reason that name changed. In psychology, we call that the framing effect. The label you put on something changes how people evaluate it. So it's the same people and the same beliefs and the same behavior. But if you call them separatists, then they sound like radicals, which is what they were.
Yes.
Call them pilgrims, and of course now they sound like brave seekers of freedom, don't they?
Yes.
And so that frame was chosen 200 years after the fact by people who needed a myth, not particularly a history lesson.
So were they not Puritans then? Because I always thought that Pilgrims and Puritans were the same thing. Oh, God. Okay, this is going to get embarrassing for me, isn't it? Right.
Yeah. No, two different people. Puritans wanted to reform the Church of England from within it, to purify it, hence the name. The separatists were far more radical than that. They actually said that the Church of England, because remember, it was during the time when
Henry VIII
Henry and all the rest of it. So separatists said that the Church of England was beyond saving, that it was essentially Catholic in everything but name, and true Christians had to break away entirely, which in early 17th century England wasn't just a theological position. It was actually a criminal act. You weren't allowed to break away from the church. So the Church of England was the state church, and attending church was compulsory. Holding your own services were completely illegal. And in fact, even leaving the country without royal permission was also illegal.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So these people are like actively breaking the law.
Oh, for sure. They were breaking multiple laws simultaneously. And look, depending upon your perspective, that's either genuine conviction or the behavior of genuine radicals who were so impossible to live with that two countries essentially tell them to sod off.
Get out, sling your hook.
But we're taught, especially the Americans are taught, that it's the conviction version. Every child learns it that way, and once that version is in, it's almost impossible to shift. And psychologically we call that the misinformation effect. You can give people the correct facts later, but it doesn't replace the original story. It just bounces off it. So the childhood version of the story becomes the scaffold, and in this instance the scaffold is fiction. It's not real.
So, like, everything is wrong then? Like, the name, the story, like, everything?
Even the clothes are wrong.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so, the black hats with the buckles and, the austere black and white outfits, this whole image that we have, that's Puritan, who were a different group entirely and didn't arrive until 10 years later.
Oh, my goodness.
The actual Plymouth settlers wore earth tones of like browns and greens and russets because they couldn't afford black dye. Black dye was really expensive. So the picture in every American's head of the Pilgrims, the way they look, is literally a picture of a very different people wearing different clothes.
So I'm just like stunned, but is any of it real then? Because like this feels like I know nothing now.
Okay, let's start with Plymouth Rock, shall we? And find out.
Yeah, because I know that bit. Even I know that bit. They stepped off the boat on, and in fact, I think it's because of a conversation you and I had about this rock that they stepped off the boat onto a rock, right?
They did not step off the boat onto a rock.
Oh God! For God's
Nobody
sake.
who was actually there ever mentioned a rock. Not Bradford, not Winslow, nobody. That entire story came from one chap, a 94-year-old church elder called Thomas Founds, who in 1741, 121 years after the Mayflower landed, pointed at a boulder in the harbour and declared that his father had told him that this was the exact spot. That's Plymouth Rock.
121 years later, like 121
and his
years.
father wasn't even on the Mayflower. His father arrived 3 years after the Mayflower. So Founds himself was born in 1647. So the foundational symbol of American identity rests on the childhood memory of an incredibly old man. Remember, back then, 94 was like ancient.
I mean, it is now, but even then it was like crazy.
But back then, when the average life was 45, 50, something like that, so it relied on the childhood memory of a very old man recounting what his father, who also wasn't there, supposedly said. Yeah.
And I mean, it's staggering because 1 million people visit it every year, right?
Yeah, they do.
Or
1 million
thereabouts, yeah.
people a year visit a lump of granite identified by hearsay, which actually has since been dragged across town, broken in half by accident, broken in half again. Pieces have been chipped off it by souvenir hunters. 1620 was carved into it. It was even used as someone's doorstep at one stage. Then it was cemented back together.
Oh my God.
And put in a Grecian temple. And the whole thing, we can say with absolute certainty, is that the Pilgrims did not step ashore on Plymouth Rock because they'd already landed in Provincetown a month earlier because they overshot where they were supposed to land. Plymouth was their second stop.
So I'm like, okay, so why does anyone care about this rock then? Like, if there's no, like, I don't get it.
Because humans are pattern-finding machines, Helen. You know that.
Yes, I do know that. That is true. They all want something to anchor on.
There's a thing called apophenia, right? Which is the tendency to find meaningful connections in things that aren't actually connected.
I'm just going to put that on my spreadsheet. Apophenia.
So a very old man points to a rock, gives it a nice story, and suddenly it's sacred, right? But then the rock splits in half in 1774, and people decide that America should now split from Britain because the rock split in half. So this
my God, sorry, wait.
this random chunk of granite becomes a divine message. And once that meaning is established, it actually becomes self-reinforcing. You know, it's an availability cascade. The more something is repeated, the more true it feels. So the rock gets its own monument. It gets taught in school. It gets millions of visitors a year. And every time we repeat it, every repetition makes it more real. And nobody checks, because why would you check something that everyone already knows?
I mean, right? I mean, that's how Thanksgiving works too, isn't it? Because tell it every November and it becomes the truth.
Exactly. And the actual event, there was no such thing as Thanksgiving. The actual event, the Harvest Festival in 1621.
Like, existential crises happening right now. Like,
well, I mean, the actual event that they're talking about, right, this harvest feast in 1621, it did happen sort of, kind of, right? So there was a 3-day feast sometime between September and November. And there are two very brief, very, very brief contemporary accounts that exist. Of course, neither calls it Thanksgiving, and neither mentions inviting the Wampanoag, the Wampanoag Indians.
What, they weren't even invited? What?
No. So about 90 Wampanoag men turned up, probably because they heard celebration, gunfire, and stuff like that, but came to find what the was going on, you know. And so they brought 5 deer with them, and there was almost certainly no turkey, and there was no pie, and there was no cranberry sauce. None of that existed in Plymouth in 1621. Of course it didn't.
So, hang on. So there was no turkey at Thanksgiving. I mean, Jesus Christ. As I said, existential crises. And the Americans are just going to love this, aren't they? Like, we are
but
done
actually,
for.
It gets worse.
Oh, God. Okay.
Because
keep going.
The separatists themselves would have been absolutely horrified at anyone calling it Thanksgiving, because for them, a Thanksgiving was a solemn day of prayer and fasting, not a feast. And certainly not a feast with people they considered, you know, godless heathens, you know?
Oh, my goodness.
These are the people who literally banned Christmas, by the way. But we'll get to that.
Oh, my God.
So
I'm just going to spend this whole day going, oh, my God.
A 3-day knees up, a 3-day party with the locals was not on brand for these people.
Sounds more like
the term First Thanksgiving was slapped on in 1841 in a footnote by a reverend called Alexander Young, who stuck the label on when he published Winslow's account. Winslow was one of, we'll get to him later. The national holiday of Thanksgiving was actually created by Abraham Lincoln in 1863, and it was created as a Civil War unifying gesture. The thing is, he didn't mention the Pilgrims at all. Abraham Lincoln did not mention the Pilgrims. He did not mention anything to do with this fairy tale feel-good thing that everybody thinks about. And the historian David Silverman describes the whole myth actually perfectly. He said that the story requires friendly Indians, unidentified by any of their tribes, because their tribes are never mentioned, teach the Pilgrims how to live,
right,
and then sit down to dinner with them, and then conveniently disappear.
And what did they disappear into? Oh my God.
War, slavery, a pike outside Plymouth where their leader's head was put on it for 20 years.
Oh my God.
But we'll also get to that. First, though, right? Yeah. So basically, the Indian who helped. Yeah, we'll get to it. Okay. Anyway, so first, though, I want to talk about what these people actually built once they had the power to build what they wanted, because this is where it gets properly mental.
It already feels like it's got properly mental, so now I'm quite scared. I'm a little bit terrified of where we're going to go.
You should be. You should be.
Okay.
So here's the bit that really gets left out of every single American textbook.
Okay.
The reason the separatists left Europe wasn't because they were being persecuted. I mean, they were being persecuted in England, that's true, kind of. But they left England for Holland, right, in 1608. Right. And the Dutch were fantastically tolerant. And Leiden, where they settled, officially declared, its official declaration of this city, of this town, was that it refuses no honest people free entry. So basically anyone was welcome, right? They could worship however they liked. They could do whatever they could believe in whatever they wanted to believe in. And nobody bothered them at all.
Right, so then what was the problem? What happened?
Well, the problem was that the Dutch tolerated everyone else. That was the problem.
Okay. Makes sense.
These people who couldn't stand it were just horrified by this. So William Bradford, who was their governor, you'll hear me mention him a few times. He ran the colony for about 30 years. This colony that the separatists set up in Holland. And he wrote the actual only real first-hand account that we have. And he complained that his children were being drawn away by evil examples into extravagant and dangerous courses. Would you like to know what those dangerous courses were, Helen?
Obviously, because I want to take them. Go on.
Learning Dutch. Yes. Making Dutch friends. And some of these children became soldiers or sailors, and a few of them, horrifyingly so, stopped going to church as often as their parents would like. Because the Dutch didn't observe the Sabbath day with sufficient misery. That was the problem. And other religious groups were allowed to worship openly, which the separatists found intolerable. Oh
my God. So the whole problem with Holland was that it was too free, that there was Holland involved. It was
it was too free, it was too tolerant, and frankly, it was too much fun. And
sounds like my kind of place.
It's this part that really demolishes the founding myth entirely, because they weren't fleeing persecution. They were fleeing tolerance, which is wild when you think about it.
That is crazy. Although it's not actually when you look at society there now, but that's a whole different kettle.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
They wanted somewhere that they could build a community that was governed entirely by their interpretation of scripture without having to share the place with anyone who disagreed. And Bradford actually wrote that one of the reasons for leaving Holland was to convert the Indians. because they had so little success regarding the Sabbath observance with the Dutch. So they needed somebody else to convert, you know. The Dutch wouldn't do what they were told to do. So they thought, you know what, it. We're going to have better luck with people who've never actually heard of Jesus.
Oh my God. That's it's genuinely funny, but in a really horrible way, right?
Well,
because
it's hilarious until you actually realize what happens next, because in Holland, they also couldn't impose their views on their own children, and that was driving them mental. And this is actually a really interesting bit of psychology, which I think you will probably find interesting as well.
I imagine I'm about to, yes.
The decision to leave, of course, makes no rational sense. They had religious freedom. They were safe. Their children were healthy and integrating into Dutch society. But they chose to cross an ocean with a roughly 50% mortality rate, rather than accept that their children were becoming Dutch. And that's loss aversion, the potential loss of their cultural and religious identity over their children was more psychologically painful than the very real risk of death. They would literally rather die than lose control.
I mean, yeah.
And I'm sure you see that in your clinical
all the time. Because it's loss aversion and risk aversion, isn't it? Like the risk is, But I see that pattern a lot, actually. Not the dying part, obviously, but the idea that somebody will blow up their entire life rather than just accept that the people around them aren't conforming to their expectations, their demands, their wants. You know, it's not really about the other people at all. It's about the terror of losing the thing that defines you. You know, it's that.
And that's exactly what's happening, you know. And one of them was a man named James Chilton, who he was actually stoned to death by a mob in Leiden in 1619 because they mistook him by mistake, for something called a remonstrant, which was a breakaway faction of the Dutch Reformed Church, which then the Dutch Reformed Church was the main Protestant church in Holland. Right. But the point of it was basically that they mistook him for this breakaway faction.
This is the separatists. Sorry, mistook him for
the separatists. Yes,
right.
Okay. And they killed him and they stoned him to death and all the rest of it. And the reason was that it was enough that he wasn't actually part of their local establishment. So the atmosphere was turning very much. And there was something called a 12-year truce between Holland and Spain, and that was about to expire, which meant that the separatists thought that, you know, they had this idea that the prospect of a Catholic army from Spain potentially invading was horrifying to them. And they thought, you know what, F it, let's go to America. And once they there's a whole thing about getting to America and all the rest of it. The ship from Holland to Plymouth in the UK, where the Mayflower went from, sank a couple of times, and you know all the rest of it. And but you know, once they got to America, once they had a blank slate and nobody was there to stop them, they built precisely the society that they'd always wanted.
I have a really quick question. Do they hinge the whole thing of persecution on the idea of the Spanish Catholic army turning up? Is that what they're talking about? No, okay. No. So they build the society they've always wanted, but what would that actually look like? What does that, how does it look?
Sharia law. That's what it looks like, Sharia law. And I mean, I'm not being flippant here, not at all.
Well, I know you wouldn't be. I'm
actually being structurally precise. They built a theocracy with scripture as civil law. So Old Testament punishments, compulsory worship, death penalty for religious and sexual transgression, bans on entertainment, state enforcement of dress codes, moral policing of private behavior, and the banishment and execution of anyone who practice a different faith. Now swap that Bible on the lectern for a Quran, and the structure is identical. absolutely identical.
It genuinely, as you were speaking earlier, I was thinking it sounds very, like it sounds very like that. But it really is quite an extraordinary thing to say about the people that the Americans celebrate as their founders. That's right. Wow.
I mean, it may be extraordinary, but it's accurate, you know.
Right. Okay.
So, and capital punishment for blasphemy was a real thing. For worshipping any god.
I'd have been dead so many times.
Right. We'd both be dead.
How many times I've said, "Oh my God," in this?
If you worshipped any other god than theirs, you were put to death. Capital punishment for adultery. Capital punishment for sodomy. Capital punishment for witchcraft. The Plymouth colony adopted the death penalty for sodomy and buggery in 1636. But I mean, to be honest with you, they were so happy-go-lucky with the death penalty that it was just like, you know what? F*** it, let's put them to death.
You're over. Because I suppose if you believe in God that much, you believe in the afterlife. So then they go, anyway, whatever.
They obviously
life is
banned
cheap.
Catholic. It is. Life outside, life for renegades is cheap. Which is so ironic considering they themselves were renegades. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It was also capital punishment if you were a Catholic priest or you came from Puritan territory. If you went into their territory for the first time, you would get a warning and banished. If you came in a second time, you were put to death. It was the death penalty. They also executed a teenager for bestiality, following the thing in Leviticus. He wasn't partaking in bestiality. He was just accused of it. You know, it was just like, well, you're too friendly with your dog. So
you love your dog too much.
So
you're too British about your dog, so you must be shagging it.
Right. Well, this is exactly it. So they set a Pequot village, an Indian Pequot village, on fire in 1637. They murdered the people who tried to escape, and they sold the survivors into slavery.
Oh my God, I'm starting to get really fucking angry. Oh my God. And this is all while they're telling themselves that they're God's chosen people. Why do you hate religion? Well, oh my God.
Because that's the engine that makes all of this work, isn't it? You say that there is a thing called HAD, HADD, which is hyperactive agency detection device, right? And it's a big. We never call it by its full name. We just call it HAD.
Okay.
Which is the human and you'll all know what this is when I explain it. It's the human tendency to see a purposeful mind behind random events, right?
Oh yes, you've always got to understand why somebody does something to make. And yes, that?
No, it's to do with religion. So, the separatists saw God's hand in literally everything. Good harvest, God's favor. Bad winter, God's test. The entire native population dying of disease before they arrived. So there was this big thing, which I'll talk about in a minute, called the Great Death. And the entire 90% of the native population was killed before they arrived. That was God clearing the land for them. A storm that didn't sink the ship, God's protection. A storm that did kill someone, God's punishment for that person's sin. And once you've got that sort of framework running, it combines with confirmation bias and becomes completely unfalsifiable. Every possible outcome, no matter what it is, confirms the thesis. There is no event, good or bad, that can make you question whether God is on your side. So,
again, question. I was listening to a podcast this morning about the building of the Sphinx in Egypt, as one does. And they were talking a bit about Egyptian religion and, Anubis and, oh my God, I've forgotten their names already. And basically saying the similar thing, that there's this idea that if God wanted it, then that, and then exactly that. But this seems like extreme version.
But it's not extreme, Helen. You still see this in modern society.
Yes, I know, but this is...
You hear religious people say this shit all the time.
I do.
I'm sorry, your child died. It was God's will.
God's will. God wanted them home.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That is the most insulting thing. But my point being that it seems like a lot of societies do that thing with the god, with the hat. It seems that's a thing.
They did.
Right. Okay. So
you only really see it now in radical societies, like Muslim society, radical Muslim, like Saudi Arabia, this sort of shit.
Right. So that's exactly how every closed system works, right? Because I've sat with people who are trying to leave groups like this, even if you like the toxic family system. And the most disorientating thing for them is realizing that the system was designed so that doubt itself is evidence that the system is right. You know, we talked about it with Gwen Shamblin as well. If you question it, you're being tested. You know,
right.
if you want to leave, the devil is tempting you. It's all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And they legalized it. So this wasn't just a belief system. This was the law.
Jesus Christ.
This was the law of the land. Church attendance was compulsory. If you didn't go to church, you would be punished. Only male church members who owned land could vote. So again...
Oh my God. Your penis is such a good, effective pen.
Right, well, the Bible dictated everything to do with civil law. It's basically Sharia law. Ministers, the priests, the preachers, and magistrates, the judges, were usually the same people.
Oh my God.
Right. And then, I've only scratched the surface.
I already feel sick, Paul. Oh my God. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Because then we get to the really fun stuff.
Oh my goodness.
They banned Christmas, as I mentioned, in 1659. And this was called the penalty for keeping Christmas, right? It was a 5 shilling fine for celebrating by feasting or any other way. They banned Easter. They banned dancing. They banned theatre. They banned card games. They banned dice games. They banned literally everything that gives life meaning and happiness. In fact, there was this man, right, was put in the stocks for 2 hours for kissing his wife on his own doorstep.
What?
When he came home from a 3-year sea voyage.
For kissing his wife?
Yeah, for kissing his wife in public on his own doorstep. He was charged with lewd and unseemly behaviour. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know, right? And they hanged Quakers, you know? Like it's nuts. So between 1659 and 1661, Massachusetts executed 4 Quakers. Now, Quakers are basically known for being... peaceful. Like Canadians.
Yes.
Like they're nice and polite and say sorry
and they'll help everyone, and they do, yes. Yeah.
Right,
This is like if you're in trouble, you always seek out a Quaker.
You go to a Quaker, exactly.
I learned that at school, actually, weirdly. I don't know why.
But for them, that was cause for death. And this was including one woman called Mary Dyer. And they they killed her, capital punishment, they gave her the death penalty, because she came back to the colony after being banished. The crime was being a Quaker, like it was a crime to be a Quaker. You weren't allowed to be another religion. It was a crime, punishable by death. Yeah. They whipped others. They branded people as well. They cut their ears off, this sort of stuff. They were brutal. And King Charles II, who was the king at the time, had to explicitly order them to stop executing people for being Quakers.
Oh my God. And do you know what? Like, this sort of thing enrages me every time, hypocrisy. Right? Hypocrisy is something that... But I keep coming back to the fact, I mean, this is what toxic people do all the time, but these people left England and then Holland because they said that they were being persecuted for their beliefs, right? And then they go and do all of this because they're the victims. What the fuck?
But I mean, the thing is, it's actually psychologically fascinating because the persecution in England was real. They were fine because they were nutters, Helen. They were absolutely fucking nutters. They were terrorists, basically.
Right, so can we just define the word
they were religious
persecuted?
extremists.
Right, so were they being persecuted or were they being contained because what they were doing was dangerous?
They were being punished because of their behaviour.
Right, which is what we still do for radicalists.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a bad thing.
In England, they were fined. They were imprisoned. Some were left to starve. And yeah, fine. You might argue that that's genuine suffering. The thing is, though, they carried that identity with them. The persecuted people of God. No, even when they themselves... Well, you can play the victim, yes.
Yes, exactly.
But it's more than that, which we'll get to. Even when they themselves became the persecutors. They were hanging Quakers, they were banishing dissenters, they were banning other faiths, and the entire time they were maintaining this self-image of a persecuted minority fighting for religious freedom. I mean, that's cognitive dissonance on a scale that's wild.
Unreal.
It's cognitive dissonance that's managed through selective attention. Basically, you focus on the original wound from way back when, and you simply don't see what you're doing now in this moment.
Right. Yeah, well, actually, I do see something like this with the people that I work with, actually. Not obviously on this kind of scale. We're not moving to countries.
No, well, I should hope
not. But that kind of pattern where someone has been genuinely, truly hurt, and yet the hurt becomes a kind of permanent credential. I call it the trauma code. It almost justifies everything, right? It stops being... And I mean this with no disrespect to anybody at all, because it's really hard to resist that if you don't know who you are outside of it. But it stops being something that happened to them and starts being who they are as an entire human. And once, it's who you are, it exempts you from looking at your own behaviour. It gives you carte blanche to do whatever you like. Right.
Well, that's moral licensing, isn't it? I mean, you've heard me mention that a couple of times in other episodes.
I used it on my child earlier today.
Did you? So, yeah, it's moral licensing. The suffering gives you a moral credential. And once you've got the credential, it permits behaviour that would otherwise be obviously wrong. So you've got, we crossed an ocean, we lost half our people, we endured persecution. Therefore, we are the religious ones. Therefore... what we do in God's name is completely and absolutely justified.
Yes,
the hardship itself becomes proof that the entire enterprise is sacred. And once it's sacred, remember, it's beyond criticism.
Yeah, because we've got to protect it, right? Because, oh my God. And then there's something really important in what you said about Holland, because it means the one place in Europe that actually gave them what they said they wanted, as in religious freedom.
Right.
They left because it came with the condition. I want things the way I want them. Okay, you can have that, but everyone else gets the same too, right? They left because of that condition, that everyone else got the thing that they wanted. But they didn't want freedom, and much like many toxic parents, they wanted, or toxic people generally, they just wanted control, right? It wasn't about freedom at all.
Yeah, no, it wasn't about freedom. They wanted control. And they wanted the doctrine that justified that control. And I suppose the doctrine that justified this, it was basically, they wanted a world that was baked into Calvinist theology, right? They were Calvinists. So they believed in predestination. Which is what,
or as in your life is all mapped out for you and you can't change anything.
The idea that God has already decided who's saved and who's damned, and that there's nothing you can do about it.
Is that not just like the fates in Greek mythology as well? Like everything...
Well, no, the fates can, your destiny can change with if the strings are woven in a different way and stuff like that. Exactly. But Calvinists don't believe that.
Okay.
But the way you knew whether you were one of God's elect was through outward signs, things like prosperity, moral conduct, community standing. So if you were doing well, and you were one of the good people who was going to be saved, God had chosen you, right? Now the thing is, if you weren't doing well, that's rather revealing, isn't it? The idea is that prosperity was evidence of God's favor and poverty was evidence of a moral failing. And what we're going to see is that's going to echo all the way through American culture for the next 400 years. But we'll come to that. We'll come to that later, because that's still a belief in American society. Right.
So what happened if someone inside the colony actually did push back? Like if someone said, "Hang on a minute, maybe we shouldn't possibly be running a theocracy. Maybe we should just pause."
Actually, somebody did do that, actually.
Oh.
His name was Roger Williams. And what's really important about this is that Roger Williams was a Puritan minister himself, right? So, he was a minister. He was one of the crazies.
So he's like high up in the whole
he was one of the crazies.
Hierarchy. Oh my God. Okay.
So he arrived in Boston in 1631. And he was so respected as one of the crazies that Winthrop, who was the governor at the time, offered him the most prestigious pulpit or church in the colony. And he turned it down because the church wasn't pure enough for him. Right? So he was one of the crazies.
The fucking arrogance of it.
Yeah. He was more extreme than the extremists.
Oh, my God.
But he reached a conclusion that horrified them, which was that civil government had no authority over religious matters and vice versa. He said that the state must not enforce worship, must not punish heresy, and must not compel belief. He actually coined the phrase wall of separation between church and state.
The separation of powers. He was going for the Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And this was the exact metaphor that Jefferson used later on to do the First Amendment.
But they threw him out for it. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they tried him. They tried him for sedition and heresy in 1635, and they banished him. Yeah.
What is sedition? But, just tell me. I forget what sedition is.
Well, that's what terrorists do, isn't it? So
I don't know, because I don't know what like.
Yeah.
What they go and
you're citing violence.
Oh, I got you.
You're going against everything, you know. And
like teenagers.
They banished him. Yeah, exactly.
Like
seditious teenagers. Yeah. But they banished him in winter. Now, bear in mind, it's not, and you know what winters in Massachusetts are like if you've ever been. They're bloody cold.
So, but
anyway,
and you're saying banishment as in literal exile, and you're sent into the snow and off you go.
They fucked him out. With the implicit threat that if they caught him, either coming back or in the general area, they'd ship him back to England, where he'd probably be imprisoned for life because he was a nutter, like an extremist nutter. Yeah. So he fled into the. Yeah, no, he fled into the wilderness, and Narragansett Indians took him in, which is quite ironic considering the Puritans, you know, how the Puritans treated them. And he founded Providence, which is now Rhode Island, you know, Providence, Rhode Island, as the first settlement in the Western world to guarantee religious freedom in its founding charter. Yeah.
Interesting.
So there was no tax money that went to churches. There was no religious test for participation. It actually became the refuge for every group that the Puritans expelled. So Baptists, Quakers, Jews, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, all of that exists because a man who was revered by them, but the Pilgrims ended up banishing. It all existed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The separation was not because of the Pilgrims. It was despite them. Yeah, and I mean, psychologically, that's reactance, by the way. You know, Williams wasn't proposing anything that would harm the colony at all. He was proposing something that threatened the power of the structure. That's reactance.
Right,
And the response was banishment in winter. And it was wildly disproportionate to the actual threat.
Right.
Which, of course, is the signature move of reactance, isn't it? When people feel that their authority is being challenged, they don't just disagree, they lash out far beyond.
Well, it becomes squish the threat, doesn't it?
What the situation warrants. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because there's something almost comic about it if it wasn't so dark. Because they fled England because they were persecuted for their beliefs, went to Holland, left because Holland was too tolerant and liberal.
Tolerant, yeah.
The irony of them leaving because it's liberal. I mean, and went to America to and built a theocracy.
Yeah.
Then banished the one person who suggested maybe people should be allowed, just maybe, to believe what they want rather than what you insist, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so,
and
Jesus.
then then their descendants put religious freedom on the national brand. So you actually couldn't write it. You genuinely couldn't write it. But the thing, I know, all this religious freedom, freedom of religion, blah blah blah, had absolutely nothing.
Yeah, but it's all religious freedom unless it's this one, and then I knew it's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the thing I haven't told you yet, actually, the thing that makes all of this even worse, is what happened to the people who were actually living there when these nutters arrived. Because the land they built their holy city on, it wasn't actually empty. It was a graveyard.
What?
So when the separatists arrived in Plymouth, right, in December 1620, they actually didn't find a wilderness which they thought they would find. They found cleared fields, they found abandoned houses, they found stored corn. The land had already been farmed, and the reason that nobody was living there anymore is, and which is probably one of the most important parts of the whole story that barely gets mentioned.
Why? What happened?
Well, between 1616 and 1619, an epidemic tore through the New England coast, right? And we called it the Great Dying. I mentioned it earlier.
You did.
And it killed somewhere between 75 and 90% of the indigenous coastal population. So the Patuxet people, whose village was literally where Plymouth now stands. Right. Because Plymouth was built on their village, was completely wiped out. Every single one of them, 100% of them were wiped out. The colonists found mass graves, but they also found stored food that nobody was alive to eat, cleared agricultural land with no one left to farm it. So, they found all of this.
Oh, and this was all before the Mayflower arrived?
Right, just before. So the epidemic ended roughly a year before they turned up. And the disease itself was almost certainly European in origin. The exact
smallpox or something.
Well, the exact pathogen is still debated. No, we don't. There was a CDC, Center for Disease Control study done in 2010, which proposed that it might be leptospirosis, which was a bacterial infection which is spread by rats from European trading ships that had been wrecking on the coast, because remember there was a lot of ships on the coast. So the Europeans may have brought this disease that killed the people whose land the Europeans then took.
Oh my fucking God. Okay. And I think you alluded to this earlier, Bert, and I think we can probably guess, but how did the colonists interpret that?
How do you think they interpreted it?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's going to be that God willed it in some way for their benefit.
It was a gift from God.
Of course it fucking was.
And I'm not paraphrasing there. John Winthrop, who was the government of Massachusetts Bay Colony, argued that God had providentially removed, they were his exact words, the inhabitants to make way for English settlement.
I am so close to using the C word.
Yes. Another colonist, Thomas Morton, described what they found as a new Golgotha. So Golgotha is the biblical name for the hill where Jesus was crucified.
Yes.
And he meant that as praise. God had turned this land into a graveyard so that his chosen people could move in.
I'm sorry, but what the f*** is wrong with these people? But okay, whatever. I mean, that is genuinely chilling. My God.
No, it is
God.
totally. And it's textbook motivated reasoning, isn't it? You know? So which is basically the conclusion came first. We are God's chosen people and this land is ours. And then the theology was reverse engineered to fit that evidence.
You know, when you tell me I've read too much into something, am I doing that motivated reasoning? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes. Retrofitting things. Yeah. So an epidemic that should provoke moral horror, because remember 70 to 90% of people were wiped out.
Right.
Or at the very least raise some serious questions about where it came from. Gets reframed as a divine property transaction. You know, God basically told us this was ours now. And, you know, of course you've got HAD doing, you know, the hyperactive agents of detection. Doing some pretty heavy lifting there, because they're not seeing, because they're not seeing a bacterial infection spread by European rats. They're seeing a purposeful act by a divine mind directed specifically at them for their benefit.
Okay, two things. First, at what point do you sort of think maybe we should work out what that actually was so we don't get it? You know,
God will look after us.
Jesus, that HAD really does do some serious heavy lifting. Okay, but the thing that really strikes me is that this isn't just something that they've told themselves at the time. This is the version that has survived as well, right? The idea that the land was empty, that it was just there for the taking, that it was. Like, they didn't do anything. That's still the story, isn't it? Like that.
Yeah, it is. No, that is still the story. It's self-serving bias, but it's operating at a national scale.
Like, it's on steroids and all sorts of...
It is on steroids.
Like, rockets
it's credit for the outcome. We built a nation, but it's denial of mechanisms, you know, because it's an epidemic that killed 90% of an existing population. Who taught the survivors to farm. Speaking of which, actually, I need to tell you about Squanto.
I think I know who that is.
Do you?
Well, isn't he... I'm scared now because of all the things that I used to believe, and now I'm starting, you know, as often happens in our conversations. Is he the friendly Indian who taught them how to plant corn? Right, because that's the version I know. Oh, God, here we go.
That's the version everyone knows, and it's... It's about 5% of the actual story.
Standard.
So his actual name was Squanto, and he was a member of the Patuxet tribe. You remember the same tribe that was completely wiped out by the epidemic? In 1614, 6 years before the Mayflower arrived, an English captain called Thomas Hunt, who was supposed to be loading fish for the Spanish market, decided that he'd make more money selling people. So he lured about 20 Patuxet men and 7 Nauset men onto his ship under the pretense of trade, and he locked them below decks. And then he flew off and started sailing for Malaga in Spain to sell them. Now, the thing is, this wasn't sanctioned by anyone. Remember, slavery was illegal. English slavery was illegal. And in fact, it was illegal in Spain as well. It was illegal to trade native Indians in Spain. So it wasn't sanctioned by anyone. In fact, his own commander, John Smith, condemned him for it. And, you know, even... Yeah, in Spain it was illegal to trade Native Americans, which is why local friars, local Catholic friars, monks, intervened and confiscated most of the captives. So he arrived thinking that he was going to make a killing, and these Catholic monks rocked up and went, I don't think so, and took them away and freed them, of course.
But he was... kidnapped and trafficked then?
Yeah, he was kidnapped and trafficked to Spain, and he was sold into slavery. So when the Spanish friars eventually freed him, he made his way to England, and he lived as a shipbuilder, or he lived with a shipbuilder, who I think also taught him how to make ships, but he learned how to speak fluent English. And he worked in Newfoundland for a while, and finally got passage back to his homeland. And I don't mean Newfoundland in
No, you mean
Canada.
in the UK?
In the UK. And finally he got passage back to his homeland in 1619. So he arrived back in Massachusetts, and every single member of his tribe is dead. So he got to his village, and the village of Patuxent is empty.
Oh my God.
You know, there's nobody there. The Great Dying had killed absolutely everyone he knew, his friends, his family, whatever. He was the last of his people.
That is... can you imagine?
Yeah.
Go through all of that. That is unbelievable. That's devastating.
It is devastating.
How do you cope with that? Jesus fucking Christ.
I don't know. That's more your thing than my thing.
Oh, well, I know. I was just thinking you're not going to answer that. That's me.
So traumatizing. But then the following year, a boatload of English settlers, the crazies, turn up and build their colony on the exact spot where his village used to stand. Can you imagine what a slap in the face that was?
Oh my God.
On the grounds where his family lived and died.
And they're saying it was God's will too, by the way. You're hearing all the time. Oh, God did this for us. They killed everyone for our benefit because you're banned.
And he can understand them because he speaks English.
Because for f***'s sake. Oh my God.
So this man who'd been kidnapped and trafficked to Spain and sold into slavery, he's returned to find that European diseases have exterminated his entire people. And this man then teaches these English settlers how to survive. So he shows them how to plant corn, where to fish, how to trade. He brokers the alliance with the Ampanoag chief, whose name was Massasoit. And without him, they would have starved. They would have starved. And Bradford, the governor, described his death in 1622 as a great loss.
Do you know when you said that the guy's name was Thomas Hunt? I had a funny feeling that Hunt was spelt wrong, to be honest. Because little did I know quite how badly spelt wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. You know, they've rocked up. They're telling him God killed everyone for our benefit. Like your whole everything is wiped out for us.
And he speaks English.
He understands it. He's been shipped off to, he's been pushed pillar to post, finally got his way back, and then these lot turn up. It's fairly extraordinary that he helped them at all, isn't it?
Well...
Oh, okay, hang on.
He wasn't just a helpful friend.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't the friendly Indian that everybody makes him out to be. He was actually a very complicated political operator. So,
I love that for him, actually. Hopefully, I don't know. We'll see.
He used his position as an intermediary to accumulate power, personal power. He told the local tribes that the English could release plague from storage pits at will. But he told the... But he told the colonists that Massasoit was conspiring against them, and both sides ended up distrusting him. Massasoit actually demanded that the colonists hand him over for execution, but Bradford refused because the colony just couldn't survive without him.
Right.
And in fact, to be honest with you, some historians actually think that he actually may have been poisoned by his own people, by other Indians.
Oh. So there's a little part of me that's like got quite a lot of like respect and empathy for his...
Sure,
do you know what? You fucked me over so much, I'm going to fuck you over and get everything I can out of it. Why not?
Yeah, for sure.
But even the one character that everyone knows from this story, the kind of friendly, hopeful Indian, is actually a man who's been enslaved, traumatized, lost everything, was navigating an impossible political situation between two groups who both needed him and both distrusted and also probably resented him for the fact that they needed him.
Right.
Like, that's it. So we've got nothing.
It's wild.
So it's all
the
myths.
thing is, well,
right?
in this particular myth, he gets reduced to a stock character, the helpful native. You know?
Oh, the cartoon version of a.
Oh, the cartoon version, exactly. No tribe has been identified, no backstory, no complexity, nothing. Which, of course, is outgroup homogeneity, isn't it? Homogeneity,
yes, of course it
homogeneity
is.
bias.
I'm sure. I'm just accepting blindly. Okay.
Yeah. The colonists, however, are all named and individualized. We know their names. Bradford, Brewster, Standish, Alden. They all get personal stories and personal legacies. The indigenous people get collapsed into one undifferentiated category, the Indians. So you've got the Wampanoags, right? You've got the Narragansett, you've got the Nauset, you've got the Patuxet, and you've got the Pequot Indians. All different people with different cultures and different political interests, all reduced to one collective noun, Indians.
Oh my God! And this one wasn't even known as his real name. He was Squanto, right?
Yeah.
But when, fuck. So
his
when
Squantum was his name, but yeah, he was known as Squanto.
He's Squanto because they couldn't be fucked to learn how to say his name properly or write it down. What the Jesus. But that reduction, that collective noun reduction, it makes it much easier to do terrible things to them, though, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
You're not personalising people.
Yeah. And I suppose that brings us to the alliance itself, because there was an alliance, the alliance between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag Indians, or the Wampanoag tribe. The thing that's presented as this heartwarming moment of friendship was nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort. It was a cold strategic calculation by two groups, both of them, operating from positions of absolute desperation. You know, the Wampanoag tribe under Massasoit, Massasoit was their Massasoit was a title, by the way, meaning Great Sachem. It wasn't his actual name. His actual name was, it's like saying Lord or Duke or Chief, right? So it was a title.
So even the name is wrong?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, kind of. His name was 𝗲𝗓𝗏.
Okay.
I'm probably butchering that.
But you're trying, and that's the point, isn't it? That we try. Because, you're not used to saying words in certain formats. Anyway.
Everyone called him Massasoit. So it was this alliance between two very desperate people.
So it was all about survival.
Yeah.
Even the name,
Because Massasoit, remember, had lost perhaps 2/3 of his people in the pandemic.
In this great dying.
In this epidemic.
Which in itself feels glamorized, called the Great Dying.
Yeah, well.
Because it's the God benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. So he lost about 45,000 people. And the Narragansett tribe to the west, they had largely escaped the disease. And so they were trying to subjugate the weakened Wampanoag. So Massasoit needed the English and their guns as counterweight. And the English had lost half of their people in the first winter because they couldn't feed themselves and still couldn't feed themselves. So they needed this alliance as well. So it was a mutual pact of desperation. But we've dressed it up as this friendship, it wasn't a friendship. The thing is, the treaty held for 50 years. But it held really only as long as the power balance was manageable, Once the English population grew and they didn't need the Wampanoag anymore, of course it collapsed. And what do you think happened? Well, what actually happened was completely catastrophic.
Oh my God. It's just Okay. But King Philip's War you mentioned.
Right. Yeah, I did.
Right.
Now, this isn't King Philip of Spain, right? So, so Massasoit died around 1661, and his elder son, 𝗏𝗏 was summoned to Plymouth at gunpoint. So much for our friendly 50-year
We're
treaty.
super friendly and we're all like on good terms and help each other out and we live collaboratively.
He was summoned at gunpoint. He was interrogated and then he died shortly afterwards. And of course the Wampanoag were furious. Furious. So Massasoit's younger son, 𝗏𝗏, who the English called King Philip, became leader. And he watched the relationship disintegrate. But the thing is, English livestock were destroying Wampanoag crops. English courts were imposing their laws on native people. They were fining them for breaking the Sabbath. Can you fucking imagine?
The arrogance of
the
arriving
total
in
arrogance.
like fucking your ego is so out of control.
Out of control.
You're like, oh my God. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Missionaries were demanding conversion to batshit cray, and they were coercing land sales. So they were making natives sell them their land under coercion. So Massasoit himself had been actually forced very late in life to agree that his people would live under English law and accept Christianity. I mean, he was forced through coercion, of course.
Obviously. So the same people, the same people who wouldn't accept Dutch tolerance were now forcing their religion on someone else. I mean, I keep coming back to it, but oh my God.
So the trigger of the whole thing actually came in 1675 when Plymouth Colony executed 3 Wampanoag men for murder. Now, under the original treaty, each group was supposed to punish their own, right?
Yeah,
so
so
he was supposed to hand over whatever, extradition, whatever. And the hangings were a violation of this treaty, so war broke out. And more than half of the 90 English towns in New England were attacked. And 17 of those towns were completely destroyed, razed to the ground. And it was actually the bloodiest conflict per capita in American history, even more than...
more than the Civil War.
Yeah, more than the Civil War, exactly. And the ending is, I think, probably the single most damning indictment of everything that the Pilgrim myth claims to represent, right? These were not a nice, wholesome, religious freedom group. They were fucking nutters.
They were the terrorists. We are talking terrorism at this point. We're talking dictatorship. We're talking...
They were religious radical extremists. They were religious radical extremists.
Yeah.
Now, 𝗏𝗏 was killed in August 1676.
Wait, sorry, who's 𝗏𝗏? Which one is...
So he is Massasoit's son.
The one they call King Philip?
No, that's Massasoit.
The older son. Yep, sorry, got you. Yeah.
And his body was drawn and quartered. So he was hung, drawn and quartered.
No. And that's particularly so they only reserved that for hugely awful crimes in the UK. And that because you were still alive when you were being quartered.
It was a humiliation.
And it was designed to stop you going to heaven because all your body parts were separated and you can't go to heaven if you're not.
I mean, the natives weren't Christian, so they didn't.
Obviously, but
anyway,
but he was still alive while it was being done. Is the point?
They put his head on a pike.
Oh, you said about
Plymouth,
him.
and it stayed there for 20 years.
20 years.
Stayed there. Mm-hmm. And his wife and his 9-year-old son were then sold into slavery in Bermuda.
A 9-year-old boy?
Yeah, by the crazies. Sold into Caribbean slavery. By the descendants.
What the fuck?
By the descendants of the people his grandfather had saved from starvation. Isn't it wild? And I mean, he wasn't alone, obviously. After the war, roughly 2,000 Wampanoag women and children and men were sentenced to slavery. And males over 14 were shipped off to the sugar plantations in Bermuda and the West Indies. And women and children were distributed into colonial households. And some historians actually believe that descendants of these enslaved Wampanoag have been identified in Bermuda today. They're checking DNA and stuff like that.
Mm.
And the thing is, it wasn't just a wartime measure. Plymouth Colony had used slavery from the beginning, you know? The Mayflower, these crazies were not against slavery. The Mayflower itself carried 18 indentured servants. So if you don't know what an indentured servant is, it's basically, it's a slave. It's a slave.
That's no other.
And wealthier Plymouth families owned enslaved black people and Native Americans throughout the entire colony's existence.
Well, actually, funnily enough, the whole Salem witch hunt thing was based on Tituba, who, did you know this bit about Tituba? Do you know about her?
No.
She was a black slave that worked for a family who had about 4 children who were all poorly, all came down one after the other with this illness or whatever. And they said it was her, that she had made them ill, and that triggered this entire Salem witch trial thing. And she was kept in prison for 2 years whilst all this was going on, and actually survived the whole thing. She didn't actually get executed, but it was all based off, it all came down to a slave being accused originally, and then this mass hysteria arising from it, which I just find it interesting. But the slavery, that was already there. It was already existing, right?
Yeah.
So the people, I think they really need to have a really good look at themselves, because like the people the Americans celebrate every Thanksgiving, not only entitled, egotistical, dictatorial, radical extremists, but they're also slave owners too.
Mm-hmm. But not just slave owners. There were slave owners who sold the children of the people who saved them into Caribbean slavery.
That is just the most...
Yeah. Without the descendants, or not the, I mean, the mechanism that makes this possible, the thing is, it's like, because again, it's all very well that you helped save us and you helped us survive and all the rest of it, but we don't see you as real humans. We don't see you as real people.
You're just utilities.
Yeah, and the mechanism that makes that possible is what we call moral exclusion. It's the process by which certain groups get placed outside the boundary within which your moral values actually apply, right? So we do this a lot with prisoners, by the way.
Yes, I can see where this would ripple everywhere, actually.
Yeah, we do this with prisoners because they're being punished, so therefore we can treat them like shit, kind of thing, In the States, where they make them work for slave labor money, like $1 an hour kind of thing.
Because they did
the thing. Because that's outside the moral values. Our moral boundaries don't apply. Because you're a prisoner, it's fine to exploit you for $1 an hour.
Unbelievable. Because
you're being punished. So again, there's this whole Puritan thread running through. And you can trace that particular arc across the entire story. The Wampanoag tribe start as very useful allies, but then they became background characters in the myth, and then they became enemies in the war, and in the end they became property. So each stage moves them further outside the moral boundary, and by the time you're selling 9-year-old descendants into sugar plantations, well, the exclusion is total, isn't it? The moral licensing from suffering, the confirmation bias that said God is on your side, and just the world hypothesis, which says that the defeated deserve their defeat. It all combines into this system where you can do whatever the hell you want, and it doesn't conflict with your self-image as God's chosen.
It's fucking insane, quite honestly. And the myth is what makes it invisible, because as long as the story, right, is Turkey and Friendship and Plymouth Rock. None of this, the reality, none of this exists, does it?
Right, exactly.
It's Delulu.
This whole
like it's
warm, fuzzy, made-up story. The myth, though, is doing some pretty active psychological work. It's not just a nice story, remember, it's a mechanism. It's one harvest feast in 1621 that has been doing moral licensing work for 400 years.
Yeah.
It was one feast. And it retroactively cleanses everything that came after it. I mean, that's survivorship bias as well, by the way. But the thing is, we tell the Pilgrim story because the Pilgrim survived. It's
well, it's history, isn't it? That's what happens.
Yeah, the victors get to write history. The people who lost, who were enslaved, who were sold to sugar plantations, they don't get to tell their versions. The winners write the myth, don't they? The losers disappear into the Caribbean, right?
Right. David Silverman's description keeps coming back to me. You know, the Indians welcome the Pilgrims, teach them to live, sit down to dinner, and then disappear. They evaporate. And this is what they disappeared into.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah. This is what they disappeared into. But there's one more thing I actually want to do, though, which is connect all of this to modern America. Because this isn't history. This is still running.
I can see it. I can see it.
So here's what I want to do now. I want to draw a line from those 17th century religious nutters all the way to modern America, because this isn't ancient history. You know, the operating system that those people installed is still running.
You keep saying operating system. What do you mean?
I do. I make it sound like a computer.
It's like it's my phone's operating system. So what do you mean by it specifically? What is that?
I mean, it's a set of foundational assumptions that got embedded so deeply into American culture that most Americans don't even recognize them as assumptions anymore. They just think of it as reality. And I think the most important one, the one that drives almost everything else, is the idea that America is chosen. You know, and you hear this all the time, that it has a special divinely ordained relationship with God that other nations don't have. You know, this one nation under God. F*** off.
God, the comment section. But okay, so that kind of divine chosen thing, that comes directly from the Puritans, but actually the separatists.
The separatists, yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
let's call them by
directly,
that.
Yeah. So in 1630, John Winthrop, who was the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is the bigger separatist Puritan settlement that absorbed Plymouth, he gave a sermon, and that sermon was called A Model of Christian Charity, right?
Right.
In which he said, "We shall be as a city upon a hill, the eyes of all people upon us."
Right.
Now, in context, that was actually a warning. He was telling his people that if they failed God, the whole world would see their disgrace. So it was anxiety, not boasting. But that phrase got completely stripped of its original meaning and turned into a declaration of American destiny. And then John F. Kennedy quoted it. And then Ronald Reagan added shining to it. So to make it a shining city on a hill. And of course, I mean, that built Reagan's entire political identity, didn't it? He put his entire political identity around that phrase.
I mean, this is, sorry, but the whole thing is just astounding to me in its arrogance. But okay, so they've gone, because I heard, when you said that quote to me, I immediately heard it as we're visible, behave yourself, a bit like on your best behaviour when you're going out for supper. And
people can see everything.
Yeah, and so instead they flipped it. Okay, so when was the sermon actually rediscovered?
I suppose the incredible part about that is that nobody had read it for 200 years, right? And it was published for the first time in 1839, and then it was completely forgotten again. But it only actually became famous during the Cold War, when politicians needed this founding text pretext for American exceptionalism. And the historian Daniel Rogers wrote a whole book about this. And his point is that the entire city on a hill mythology is essentially a 20th century invention. And it was grafted onto a 17th century anxiety attack. But of course it worked, and it became the foundational idea of how Americans understand themselves. So it became this foundational idea of American self-understanding. America is special. America is chosen. God has a plan for this nation, you know?
Oh my gosh. They still do it. You hear that all the time.
They still do it,
but no other developed country thinks like this, do they?
No other developed country actually even comes close. You know, the UK doesn't end political speeches with "God bless Britain." Can you imagine? No. You know,
we'd all be like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you doing that?
Like,
why are you bringing God into
cringe?
it? Like crazy."
You know?
Something
France doesn't, put "In God We Trust" on its currency. Germany doesn't have a national prayer breakfast. Japan doesn't require its leader to demonstrate personal godliness as a qualification for office.
Excuse me, sorry, one moment. Did you just say national prayer breakfast?
Oh, yeah.
What?
But America does all of those things, and the reason it does it is because people, the people who founded the culture were religious radicals. I mean, just think about what that means. The most extreme people left Europe. The moderates stayed in Europe.
Yes.
So you've got a founding population with an unusually intense relationship with religion. I mean, one could say a completely psychotic relationship with religion. And this intensity was then reinforced by wave after wave of religious revival. The Great Awakenings in the 18th and 19th century, and then by fusion of religious identity with national identity. And then, of course, the Cold War came along when godless communism, because, of course, communism bans religion. So godless communism came along, and, so that made American Christianity a patriotic duty, almost.
Gosh, it's like they had this echo chamber that just kept reinforcing itself, whereas over here we had
an echo chamber.
Okay, so America is more religious than Europe, not because of something that happened recently, but because of who showed up in the first place, right? Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It's called cultural imprinting.
Ooh,
and the founding conditions of a society disproportionately shape its long-term character. So every other developed nation went through the Enlightenment and the secularization in place, right? So their religious fervor, it cooled over centuries as institutions modernized.
Right.
The United States didn't cool in the same way because the thermostat was set by people who had crossed an ocean rather than turn the temperature down. In fact, they wanted the temperature all the way up to 100.
All the way up, and if nobody else was going to do it, then they were just going to knock them off. And okay, interesting.
Right, this is it. Yeah.
Okay, so when I think of America and religion, I often think of that Bible Belt area. So is the Bible Belt a direct continuation of all of that? No,
I don't think it's a straight line from Plymouth to Alabama, but the DNA is there. So what happened is that the original Puritan intensity in New England, believe it or not, actually faded over generations. So if you go to New England now, it's actually quite liberal and not particularly religious and all the rest of it, So, and in fact, they're quite normal in New England. But so that faded over generations as the colonists got richer and more comfortable. And, this is what happens. Societies get wealthier, people get wealthier. And with wealth tends to come liberalism. Ironically, it was actually the South, which was originally settled for commercial reasons, not for religious ones, that became the heartland of evangelical Christianity. And that happened through the Great Awakenings, which were these massive waves of religious revival in the 17 and 1800s, where Puritan-influenced preachers went south with, tent meetings and fire and brimstone sermons. You hear these sermons all the time, God is going to punish you and blah, blah,
Yes.
blah. And the specific mechanisms transferred then from Puritanism into Southern evangelicalism. And what has transferred is basically biblical literalism, the concept of the elect, the fusion of religious and civic identity, and of course, moral policing. Everybody loves the moral policing.
Oh, God.
Every day,
Everyone loves
the idea that the state has a duty to enforce religious values. Like, it just makes no sense to me, because they have this separation of church and state, and now you're actually saying, the state has a duty to enforce religious values. Tennessee, for example, today has the highest proportion of evangelical Protestants of any state, and it's 52%. 52% of people. Alabama's non-religious population is just 12%. So no European country has numbers that look anything like that. And to be quite honest with you, if one of our politicians anywhere in Europe brought God into their speeches, people would go, "F***ing nut job."
Like, truly. Like,
nut job. Yeah.
They just would not get voted in.
No.
No.
People would think they were absolutely psychotic.
But it would be okay if they had a faith. We wouldn't be bothered if they did, but if they bring it into their politics.
We had a Hindu prime minister.
Yes.
Nobody cares.
Nobody gives
what
a
you
shit.
believe in. Just don't bring it into your political speeches.
Just be a good human being, right? So the just world thing that you mentioned earlier, the elect, that threads all through this as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
right.
And it threads through quite elegantly, but actually in quite a horrible way. The Puritan doctrine of the elect said that God has already decided who's saved and who's damned, right?
Yeah.
So it's very Calvinistic. And the way you can tell this is through outward signs. So prosperity means God has chosen you. Poverty means it hasn't. And you see this play all the way through the United States at the moment. Now, strip the God language out of all of that. And what have you got? You've got the American dream. The idea that success is earned and poverty is deserved. That's essentially the American dream.
Yes, it is.
The idea
they do.
That,
yes.
Yeah. The idea that, there's a whole thing that goes around. Somebody says, well, the American dream is called the American dream because it's only real when you're asleep. But
it's so true. Never a true
well,
word.
now it is. The American dream in the 50s was a real thing. But the idea that hard work guarantees prosperity, and if you're poor, it's because of some sort of moral failing, right? This is the idea that still permeates. Max Weber actually wrote about this 100 years ago in what was called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. And he traced the connection explicitly from Calvinist theology to modern capitalism. And the Prosperity Bible and the Prosperity Gospel, which you see in huge mega churches in America today, the ones telling people that God wants them to be rich, and they're massively popular. These are the preachers who are, rocking around in private. God wants me to have a private jet.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. God wants me to have a private jet too.
Me.
But so what these prosperity gospel mega church preachers are doing is they're running a version of 17th century Puritan election theology, but better lighting, bigger stages, better music, and donation pages, I suppose.
And that's still the just world hypothesis.
It is, yeah. The just world hypothesis is essentially been taken and then dressed up as economics. The world is fair, people get what they deserve, and if someone is suffering, it must be their fault. You can see it in how they look at social programs.
I was just thinking that with the food stamps.
Food stamps. If you need food stamps, it's your fault. It's a moral failing on your fault. this kind of thing. It's not that you need help and we should look after the weakest and most vulnerable. It's that the weakest and most vulnerable, the poor people, it's their fault. They've obviously failed God, and so there's a moral failing somewhere. And the thing is, it's one of the most persistent and damaging cognitive biases. Yes. And the Puritans essentially built the entire national character around this. So, you know, the American resistance to universal healthcare, their resistance to welfare, you know, their resistance to any safety net at all starts to make more sense when you understand that there's a 400-year-old theological conviction underneath it that says poverty is a moral condition. It's not an economic one. It's a moral failing.
Does that also explain the blind acceptance of the lack of holiday pay, employee rights, what was the other one? Maternity leave and cover, things.
Yeah. I mean, it would certainly, there's this whole mentality of why should your company pay for you to do nothing? Why you can also see it permeating through the work ethic.
Yes.
And it's not even work ethic. You hear Americans say, "Oh, we work harder than everybody else." It's like, yeah, because they can fire you like that.
Yes, because you've got no safety nets.
But again, you can also see it through this idea of this moral. I don't necessarily want to call it superiority because it's not moral superiority, but it's this moral,
like a justification.
It is a justification, but it's like I'm a better person because I work 80 hours a week. You know, this gives me moral authority that I work 80 hours a week, you know? And the fact that you work 40 means you're lazy, you know? So,
right.
That's a moral failing.
And you wanting rights means you're morally flawed because
you're morally
you
flawed.
Need them.
And, you know, again, that comes down to the whole massive consumer society that's there, because it's all about showing that you have more, bigger house, bigger car, more things, because that's why they talk about their wages so happily, because it shows that they're good that's
people.
A moral elevation. They're good people. Whereas the less you have, the more of a moral failing it is, and that goes all the way back to the separatists.
Jesus, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, just going back to what you were saying, because I want to come back to the Sharia thing, because I think that is the part, even though it's super easy to see from where I sit, which is not as an American or you know, from the USA. I think it's that part that's going to make people feel very genuinely uncomfortable because they won't want to see it.
It should make them uncomfortable.
Yes, it should. I agree, actually. I'm with you.
Because
Go on.
There is a structural comparison, you know, which is civil law derived from religious scripture.
Yes.
So, capital punishment for blasphemy, capital punishment for adultery, capital punishment for sodomy, capital punishment for heresy, right? Compulsory worship, prohibition of music, prohibition of dancing, prohibition of the theatre, state enforcement of dress codes, subordination of women, banishment or death for adherence to other faiths, you know, moral policing of private behaviour. I will decide who you can sleep with in your bedroom, you know? So it's a chosen people with a divine mandate. I mean, that's not my description of Sharia law. No. That's a factual description of what the Puritans built in Massachusetts. The structure is absolutely identical. And as I said before, the only difference is the book they're reading from on the lectern. Right.
I mean, I see it completely, but the Americans just can't see it, can they?
No, well, they can't see it because the myth prevents them from seeing it. And there is a specific mechanism for why this happens. It's called the representativeness heuristic, which is the tendency to judge a category by its most vivid or available example, right? So Americans judge Islam by its most extreme expressions. ISIS, the Taliban, you know, all of these. And then they judge Christianity by their local church, by the nice vicar, by the Sunday school, by the harvest festival. So Islam looks like theocracy and Christianity looks like community. But if you judge both by their most extreme historical expressions, the comparison is absolutely structurally identical. The Puritans did everything the Taliban did. And they just did it in English.
The irony then is that the thing that Americans are most afraid of, as in Sharia, religious law taking over civil government, is the thing that their national heroes actually built, and they already have it. Right?
Because the thing that I mean, yes, in terms of what they're terrified of, that Sharia law takes over civil law, all the rest of it. But it's the thing that their constitution was specifically designed to prevent. Because the man who proposed, as I said before, separating church and state was banished by the founders for suggesting it, remember?
Yeah, I do.
The First Amendment exists to stop people doing what the separatists and pilgrims actually did.
Wow.
And now you've got this Christian nationalist movement who are all very proud to call themselves Christian nationalists, which is just bizarre to me, whose explicit project is to undo that separation. That's what they want to do. They want to undo it. They want to go back to this separatist ideal. They want to put prayer back in schools. They want to base legislation on biblical principles. Sharia law. They want to define marriage through scripture. They want to display the Ten Commandments in courthouses. They're not trying to build something new, Helen. They're trying to restore something old. So what they're doing is they're reaching past the Constitution. They're reaching past Enlightenment. They're reaching past Jefferson and Madison. And they're reaching all the way back to Winthrop and Bradford and the theocracy that banished anyone who disagreed or put people to death if you disagreed.
Jesus, and you think
this whole idea that America is a Christian nation, the Constitution specifically says that it's not.
Right. But people get very pissed off about that. But they, as I just said, I think you probably missed it, but they think they're the ones being persecuted.
Of course they do.
Like, it's so, like, what is... Okay.
But they think they're being persecuted because that's the founding identity, you know? Persecuted people of God. It's what the separatists convinced themselves was happening.
We must protect Christianity at all costs.
Right, but not just Christianity, their idea and their form of Christianity.
Yes, this version.
Remember, the Dutch were too liberal. The English were also, you know, it wasn't a severe enough form of Christianity. So the cognitive dissonance we talked about earlier, it's not just historical, it's happening right now. The Christian right in the United States holds enormous political power. They have Supreme Court justices, they have state legislatures passing law based on their religious values. They have a massive media infrastructure, and they genuinely believe that they are a persecuted minority. You can hear it. You can hear what they say. They say shit like, Christians are being persecuted. White Christians are being persecuted. You make up 80% of the country. Get a fucking grip. But that's the separatist, the pilgrim identity. Yeah, it's 400 years old, but it's still doing a lot of work.
I mean, it's wow. And that whole Make America Great, I can't even bear
MAGA.
saying it, MAGA essentially, fits all into this too, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, perfectly. Perfectly.
Right.
That's declinism. That's
it's a new word. What? Tell me, please.
It's the belief that things were better in the past, and that the present is falling away from a golden age. But you see, I mean,
wait. Can I ask a question? Wait, because is that what's different to that? Because you hear people talking about, miss the old days in the 50s, like milkshakes and blah blah blah.
To generation.
But what is the difference between nostalgia and declinist? What did you call it? Declinism. Sorry.
Well, they're both looked through rose-tinted glasses, aren't they? So very little. I mean, nostalgia is this idea of Looking back and I feel nostalgic. It's like, oh, that was a good time. I really enjoyed it. That nostalgia. Declinism is this idea that life was so much better back then. We want to go back there. Life is good. But I mean, the thing is, the Victorians thought the same about the Georgians. The Georgians thought that,
we all do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you do it to me all the time.
1920s harked back to the 1800s. 1950s harked back to the 1920s. 1980s harked back to the 1960s. Now we hark back to the 1980s. It's all bullshit. We all do.
This is why you send me videos off YouTube with like music that we used to listen to as teenagers.
Right.
And
That's
tell me
nostalgia.
we had the greatest
I don't want to go
music
back.
No.
I don't want to go back to the 80s.
No, because there's no Wi-Fi.
Well, exactly.
Like
exactly
you.
that, But
anyway, sorry,
it's this idea that, the present day is falling away from a golden age. And the again in that slogan, Make America Great Again, points backwards to a time when America was supposedly great. And, of course, the greatness they're pointing to, whether they like it or not, or whether they know it or not, is a more religiously homogenous, culturally conformative, white Christian nation. Now, the thing is, I say whether they know it or not, they know it. That is what they want,
So it's just make America white again, is what they're saying.
Well, exactly. Let's make America white and Christian again. Which is bizarre because, it never was really white.
Well, no, because it was... It wasn't only not white. They rely on the workforce of the immigrants to do so much. If the immigrants all left, and I say immigrants very loosely because I still cannot compute how you, as a white person in America, consider yourself native when you're only 4 generations out. Like, it's not like, it's not a...
But
go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rosy retrospection, isn't it? But it's implied, it's applied to the entire country. The past is remembered as noble and pure, rather than what it actually was. The restoration that they want is a return again to this operating system that the Puritans installed. A scripture-based governance, compulsory Christian identity. Everybody, if you're not Christian, is basically a heathen and evil. The moral policing, I mean, they all do the moral policing now. They love a bit of moral policing. And the certainty that comes from being God's chosen nation. Yeah.
So the myth isn't just a nice story about Thanksgiving at all.
No, the myth is a machine. It's doing a lot of active work, even still now. And we also have the affect heuristic, which is the tendency to let your emotional response override rational evaluation. So it means
see that so often.
Yes, of course you do. And it means that the warm feelings around the Pilgrim story then prevent critical examination, right? So because you get a warm and fuzzy feeling about the story we've been told, we don't look any closer. Then you have...
does the affect heuristic therefore create cognitive dissonance?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Of course it does. Well, to a degree. You then have the endowment effect, meaning that Americans own this myth. It's theirs, part of their identity.
Right.
And when something becomes part of your identity, you fight to keep it, regardless of whether it's accurate or not. And then you have the availability cascade. This means that the story has been told so many times that it feels self-evidently true. And in fact, what was his name? Goebbels in Nazi Germany said, if you tell a lie, if you tell something over and over and over again, it becomes fact. And in fact, the bigger the lie, the better. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I think you said that earlier, actually, that the
I
thing
may have
about
done.
Goebbels, it's just so, carry on, sorry.
And the moral
so
licensing means that this one harvest feast that I talked about in 1621 is still providing cover for not examining what has actually happened, what was actually built, and what's still running underneath the surface of American political life.
It's just nuts, isn't it? It's just...
Yeah. It's a fascinating story.
It is.
Fascinating.
But it's also horrifying how many people are, anyway, unaware. I mean, I'm sure I am in many ways of my own stuff, but anyway, could go down a whole rabbit hole, and I will later. So what is the takeaway then, right? Because if someone is listening to this and they've always believed the Pilgrim story, guilty, although I did know a little bit that it wasn't true, but I also did not have a clue about the level and depth. So what should they actually be taking from this conversation that they're listening to?
That not all myths are innocent. They're not just charming stories that simplify complicated history. You know, they do work. The Pilgrim myth specifically does the work of disguising a theocracy as a democracy, disguising intolerance as freedom, disguising conquest as settlement, and disguising one group's religious extremism as universal American values. And as long as that myth stays intact, Americans can't see the thing that's staring them in the face. When I say Americans, there are, of course, many enlightened ones, but the majority still believe this myth. And they can't see what's staring them in the face, which is that the people they're told to be most afraid of, religious extremists who want to impose scriptural law on a secular society, are the people they celebrate every November. You know? The call is literally coming from inside the house. It always has been. You know?
And yet they refuse to answer.
Right.
Or like make any kind of like look at the caller ID. Like they don't, there's no engagement with how do I know what I know? This is one of my favourite questions for clients actually. When they say, oh, I'm lazy, I'm selfish, I'm this, I'm that, the other. I go, well, how do you know that? How do you know what you know? It's one of my favourite questions. Why do you believe this thing? And these people are so scared of something that has driven their entire thought process around literally every single social mechanism in their country, because that is why they don't like, as you said earlier, the whole universal healthcare, giving social welfare, giving any kind of support to people who are just down on their luck. I saw a video this morning and I could genuinely cry, a woman and her daughter who was maybe about 11, the child, and they were loading their car with groceries, and one of these men, you know, these people that do like, let me give you $1,000. If you show me kindness, I'm going to reward it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he sort of says, oh, I'm really down on my luck. Have you got any spare food? And she immediately just gives him a tube of Pringles. And I laughed because I was like, not the Pringles. But he immediately then gives them $1,000. They then reveal that the child has got brain cancer, is undergoing chemotherapy, and the mother, who I think was a single parent, has missed rent 4 times, is about to be made homeless, and they're going to have to live in her car while her child has chemotherapy because there are no systems in place and because of the medical bills. What the kind of a country is that? That is not first world thought processes. And so, yeah, the delusion of this fantasy of America being the greatest, it's terrifying as an observer because the belief is so strong. Isn't it?
It is. I mean, the thing is, there's an awful lot of people who know that's not the case. I mean, you saw the No Kings rally at the weekend.
No, I didn't.
Well, you probably didn't because obviously you don't watch or listen to
you get news. So cross. I said I was going to read the news more, and then I didn't do it, and then 2 major things have happened, and I'm like,
so they it was the largest protest in history from what I can tell. And there is this huge movement of people saying, no, this is not acceptable.
No.
So
it isn't good. I'm glad that's happening.
It's not everyone, you know?
No.
There is a huge, there are millions within the country who are going, listen, we need to fix this. So, it's not sweeping cognitive dissonance. There are people. Do you know what the irony is? The Pilgrims would have hated Thanksgiving. They would have hated it.
Well, because they wanted you all to starve, didn't they? Like when they
No.
What was it? Go on, why would they have hated it?
Because you're celebrating something. You're having a feast.
Oh yeah, well, that's why I said about the staff, because they would have, how dare you have fun?
They'd have despised the First Amendment, despised it.
Gosh.
But they'd have been absolutely delighted by the Christian nationalist movement. They would have been thrilled by this. Anyway, let's leave it there.
Okay. Should we do Mother Teresa next time? Just to really throw the cat amongst the pigeons.
Yes, let's do Mother Teresa. She was a bit
buckle
of a
up
bitch.
for that. She was a bit of a bitch. Is not the language I used to you when I said, let's do her.
Let's do her. I know a lot about Mother Teresa. Let's do her.
Okay. All right. I'm in. All right. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. Genuinely,
it is interesting.
I find it fascinating.
It is. It's, the
psychology is just, it blows you away.
The psychology behind it is fascinating. How it goes through,
everything
from 400. And in the scheme of things, it was only 400 years ago. Like, it wasn't that long ago.
That's nothing. No.
There are bars here older than that.
I know. The pub down the road is older than that here. Like, it's crazy. My house is a quarter of that age.
But there's a pub down the road that's older than that. There's churches that are older than that. So it really isn't that long ago.
No.
So...
In fact, I'm pretty sure the church here is much, much older. Our families...
Right, much older than that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
There we are. Yeah.
See you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hype. People are finding the hype button, which is fabulous.
I've seen. Thank you so much. Yeah. That's so cool that they're finding that. So,
somebody gave us 2,000 hypes. I don't know how much you can give, but we'd like them all, please.
Thank you. Yes, all of them. Every single. All right, everyone. Take care.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.